All right, what's your 2-unit play?
So I just mentioned the 49ers, and they to me they do feel like a team that they might just, when we get to the end of the year, peak at the right time, and they're right back in the conversation for the Super Bowl. Yep. So this week I'm going to take the 49ers laying 5.5 at Tampa Bay. The 49ers bye could not have come at a more perfect time. Like, this is a situation where I just love the spot, I think. You get them coming off the bye. You have Tampa Bay coming off the short week, gut-wrenching overtime loss in Kansas City, where like that felt like a sort of a kitchen sink effort from the Bucs, or like that the third loss in a row, like they kind of left it all out there, and now I could see where this thing might spiral a little bit. Which is I still kind of like the Bucs. Like they play their ass off. Like they're in most games. I like their offense. But this is a game where I could totally see the 49ers coming off the bye and just rolling, kind of two different weight class situations. I feel a little similar to I did last week with Baltimore and Denver, where it was just like, I think these two teams are in totally different spots in their respective conference. And this has the potential to get away from one team. No, I think this is another game where you mentioned the high total in that Dolphins-Rams game. This total at 50.5, so they're expecting a lot of points here as well. For me, that makes the spread, north of a field goal, sort of in that dead zone underneath the touchdown, just a little more palatable. Obviously, you mentioned a few minutes ago Christian McCaffrey back. I don't think we can really overstate the importance there, even if he is on probably a pitch count, if I was to guess. But I also wonder if the 49ers offense, it hasn't really looked right, like we've seen it in previous years. But I mean, they're still second in yards per play, 8th in EPA per play, 6th in points per game. So despite all of the injuries, moving pieces, not really looking right, sitting there with a record we're not accustomed to seeing, it's still a pretty good team and a pretty good offense. And I think that once they find their footing, which they could do this week against a Tampa Bay team that their defense has been pretty atrocious over the last 3 weeks especially. I think this is a game where I think this is one-sided. Yeah,
this is one I looked at too. I think it opened at 6.5 too, and it's down to 5.5. So it tells you everybody's going the other way. But probably just because the number feels too high for some people. But yeah, I think I'm with you. I think if the 49ers do win this, I think they win it going away, because I think you laid out a lot of good points about the Bucs and where they're at right now. Just kind of a tough road to hoe. Yeah, they're like the best team that's lost 3 in a row that I've seen in a long time, where you just look at the standings and that L3 really stands out. But it's like, when I watch them or when I look at the numbers, it feels like they're better than maybe the results show.
Yeah, so there's a chance they take 2 of those 3, and then we're having a totally different conversation about that team.
And if they lose this week, I still wouldn't completely sleep on them to win. Maybe not win the division, but get in the playoffs. We were just talking about strength of schedule. They have pretty much by far the easiest schedule. After this week, the toughest opponent still left on their schedule based on where we're at right now is the Chargers. They still have 2 with the Panthers, Raiders, Giants, Saints, and Cowboys. So I'm looking to double back next week if they lose this. I kind of want them to lose.
They'd be sitting there.
I still don't totally trust Atlanta either.
They'd be sitting there at 4-6,
getting swept by Atlanta,
which is a deficit, obviously, but not an insurmountable deficit. Not I look at that and I'm like, oh, that feels a lot more attainable than the Dolphins at 2-6 that we were just talking about. Especially given the state of the NFC.
Well, I was just going to say, too, you want to talk narratives, too? Now I can fast forward to January. I can see them rematching with the 49ers and be like, this was the low point of their season. Go. They turned around after that. They lost 4 in a row.
It's the foresight that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. My 2-unit play, right? We're on 2 units. I'm taking Houston catching 3.5 points at home against the Detroit Lions. I guess I'm just jumping on an opportunity to get the field goal plus with the hope that Houston is still going to be closer to what preseason expectations were for them than what we've maybe seen so far this year. Couple tough losses the last few weeks with the Jets loss that we talked about on Halloween. They lost to the Packers at the buzzer a couple weeks, 3 weeks ago. It has not looked as good.
Halloween was only last week.
What?
Halloween.
I know.
How was that only last week?
That's why it's election season.
Not to be the time guy.
I know. Leaves are falling too. Let me tell you. Yeah, Houston. Like, I guess if they lose this game and if they get their asses whooped, which is in the range of outcomes against a very good Lions team, maybe it's time to reassess. Like, this is not the year that they were gonna take the next step. But again, 3.5 points. It feels like a good spot. They've been kind of in a brutal stretch, but they do typically play close games. 4 of the last 6 have been decided by 4 or fewer. One of those games within the 6-game stretch that wasn't decided by 4 or fewer was a 41-21 win at New England. Pretty big rest advantage. Obviously, they played Thursday night on Halloween. They've had time to digest their candy, move on. They've sat around, waited all week, while Detroit had to go on the road last week. Tough spot, go to Green Bay, win an emotionally charged game, playing 2 road games in a row here. That's a potential letdown coming off of the big win last week against the Packers. With the actual on-field football stuff, Houston sounds like they're going to get Nico Collins back. I still have questions about the Detroit defense that weren't actually answered last week. Sure, Zadarius Smith is going to help them, and I guess like a pass rusher is the kind of guy who can just hit the ground running. But speaking of running, you kind of run on them. The Packers ran the ball at will last week and then inexplicably kind of just got away from it, despite the fact that their quarterback had a sprained groin or whatever it is, and it was raining out, which is dumb. But the Lions have allowed at least 138 yards on the ground in each of the last 3 weeks. Get that run game going for Houston. Set up play action. Set up the deep ball. Tank Dell, Nico Collins. I think this is going to be as close as they're going to be to full strength on offense. I wasn't overly impressed with what I saw from the Lions last week either, as really watching them up close. I know the weather sucked, but the Packers more or less gave them that game. I think you look at the yardage and things like that. The Packers kind of ran all over them, literally and figuratively. So I do think if Houston can just play responsibly, they can hang around here. I think they can match the offensive output that they're going to get from the Lions, and I think this ends up being within the 3.5. I think it's just a field goal game. Probably the Lions probably still do win, but I think Houston, in a last-ditch effort, gives them a real strong effort.
You mentioned a very important point in there, which is if you're ranking weeks that have buys, right around Halloween seems like a nice one.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Like it's nice, especially when Halloween falls on a Thursday.
Yeah, and
you sit around. You get a lot of festivities.
Middle of the season too, right? Like good time to recharge. Apple picking is
there's a lot you can just get into around that time of year. The weather is still nice enough to go outside and do some things.
If you're in the, what's the weather like in Houston?
Well, no, I'm just saying generally. Like if you're our Northeast team,
it's 75 degrees outside today.
Nice.
So
Real
you
nice.
can go tanning, go to the beach.
One other thing, if I was to hand you $1,000 right now, let's just call it 1,000.
Sure.
Would you rather take the Lions to win the Super Bowl at plus 480, or the Texans at 22-1?
Lions plus 480. But I don't have a lot of money. So
that's why I'm handing you the $1,000 that I'm getting from somebody else too, because I don't have much money either.
I would ask, can I pocket this? And you'd say, no, you have to make a play. And then if that's the case, I need my best possible option here. Detroit is close to running away and hiding in the NFC. And for a team that at least the narrative says they can't go outside, they can't go on the road, I think they answered some of those questions last week for starters. But them being in Detroit for the entirety of the NFC playoffs, as opposed to this Houston team, if they do get hot, get in the playoffs, they're going to have to go on the road to Baltimore and or Kansas City. It's just, there's a reason the numbers are different. I think you just look at that Lions team. It's a pretty well-oiled machine. I just trust them a lot more than I do the Texans.
Yeah, who's the second best team in the NFC? According to the odds, it's the 49ers and the Eagles.
Yeah.
They're both 5-1 to win the NFC. And then you get to the Vikings at plus 950, the Falcons plus 950, the Commanders plus 950. But you're right, it is. There's a clear, they're the clear head of the class, and then I don't know. I still kind of like Philly, but
I would probably say the Eagles, just if I was to make a bet on it. So we talked about Nico Collins coming back. Talked about Christian McCaffrey coming back. One thing I kind of conjured up in the group chat was is Christian McCaffrey the most important player to the second half of the 2024 NFL season? Because I think you can make a pretty compelling case where he is. let's go back and revisit this NFC conversation, right? If he comes back and is fully healthy and gives that offense that element back, like, you might as well load up on the Niners right now, because you're going to get the best value that you're going to get if they come out and blow doors, as you kind of talked about.
Sure.
Like, the value for betting on them is going to go away.
Because then you're talking about the offense is on par with Detroit's offense,
bingo.
But San Francisco's probably got the better defense, right?
Yeah, I would think, and obviously the pedigree as well. So yeah, the more I think about it, I mean, this is something I haven't really given a whole ton of thought to.
That's what we do here. We just throw it out there and see what happens.
But yes, I would think Christian McCaffrey is the most important player in the second half of the NFL.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who else would fall into that category.
Like Jaden Daniels, is that, like, I guess we're talking about, like, I guess, like, the only answer is probably a quarterback if you really wanted to answer it to the fullest,
Yeah, I'm not looking at the list of teams where we can.
But it's because, like, quarterbacks are the most important position. So, is there a guy coming back? I don't think so. Yeah, I think it's McCaffrey.
Yeah,
I think he makes everything else. It's weird. Like, they are one of the few teams where I think a non-quarterback makes everybody else around them better and takes a lot of pressure off, especially considering all the injuries that they've had as well. I think he's the key to getting them back to being an NFC championship favorite. I don't know if they get there, but I think he's the most likely to get them back.
No, I don't think. I think you're probably right, but I do think that the Nico Collins return is bigger than maybe we're giving it credit for.
Sure. Well, I mean, I am. I'm picking the Texans.
Yeah, but I think he's far and away the best receiver on that team.
Yeah.
Even when everybody's healthy, and now that they are dealing with injuries, there, like, to the point you made at the top, like, this is sort of a last ditch effort for them to prove that this is a year that they can kind of go all in on. So I think, that offense looks a lot different with him on the field.
Yeah, I agree.